colleagues. My name is Atle Schekland. I'm the CEO of Infotection. I'm joined here with two fantastic experts, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves in a second. We will here cover how to best assess and pilot the value of Copilot for Microsoft 365. And we'll go through first a little bit introduction, then the enterprise risk review, and what are the options of how to move forward. But I have some awesome, I said, colleagues that join me here. Andrew, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Atle. Lovely to speak to everyone today. I'm Andrew Bentley. I lead the security business here at Microsoft UK. And as Atle's already shared, so I'm going to come and talk to you a little bit more around what we're seeing in terms of areas to think about how you maximize the value of generative AI tools like Copilot for Microsoft 365, but at the same time sort of minimize the risk for your business as well. Been at Microsoft for about 15 years.
Thank you. Nice to have you here. And my colleague Vivek, you'll introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vivek. I'm based in the UK as well, and I'm CTO at Infotection. Today, I will talk a little bit more about what options are available if you're considering Copilot. And from our experience of working with customers, what is the essential checklist which you should consider as part of getting ready for Copilot.
So thank you. I'm looking forward to that. There's a chat here. We'd love for you to just say hi, at least in the chat. We're also going to ask you questions. If you have questions, please use the chat. So we can actually use that also to learn from each other in this webinar. I'm just going to say a few more words in the beginning here to set the scene. One is who's Infotection. If you don't know us, we basically are really just focused on how to best manage, protect information and leverage information in Microsoft 365 and beyond. That is both to help you what's the strategy, what's the architecture and adoption, but also solutions that actually, provide operational automation or expand the functionality to other workloads. We work with leading companies around the world, helping them with this, also very close with Microsoft Engineering, and very happy to work also very close with different Microsoft organizations in each country across Europe and North America. But let me go into setting the scene instead here, the main topic for what's coming. I like this picture. Objects in the mirror are closer than what they appear. This is from the Jurassic Park, the first one. And the point why I chose this picture as background is the CEO of Forrester's and one of the big analyst firms that basically said, and perhaps the last paragraph is most important, is that if you're in your 40s or plus 40s, I would say, you're going to experience 3-4 like big technology changes in society. Internet was one, mobile is one, Gen AI is another one. And at Forrester's analyst firms, they usually be cautious about asking people to be careful, not rushing into things here. But for Gen AI, they say they're breaking the rules, that you need to move and you need to act on this now. So start moving. If you can get next slide again, Vivek. And if you look at Gartner, another analyst firm, and that is that Gen AI will play a role in 70% on text and data heavy tasks by 2025. 2025, wait a second, that's just next year, up from less than 10% last year. So it means that there's really a revolution going on about how this is going to transform how we manage, how we process information. And so just keep this in mind, it's like, how are we going to do this? Next slide again, Vivek. Because Copilot for Microsoft 365 is one way to fast track to achieve this, even though there's many other options for you, but that's one way to actually then get started. And perhaps the Gartner is then correct because more and more adoption around this, but how do you do this in a good way? A couple of other things I want to share, if I can get next slide, please. And that is that what's then the value of this? What is it? It seems like more and more now, the successful companies are really about identifying a portfolio of use cases. Research out there is starting to come in. What's the value? For example, here, ChatGPT has shown to improve worker productivity by 30%, 37%. But again, it depends on also, of course, the picture here from Office Space movie. It depends where you are from the starting point. And the next slide again, please. Also, if you look at it, it's Gartner's did some research into what do we expect of early adopters. What do we see? This was the research just this year that's happening. I would see that because it's not only internally, but it's also external, provide more personal customer service, are the ways we can do more things faster. Like here, for example, all the data information you have available in this warehouse in the Indiana Jones movie, how can I use that to better serve it to those that need it? Improving productivity, but also customer service. And perhaps the last example, if I can get the next slide, is that what about customer service then? This is research from Stanford that basically found that if you use conversational assistant in customer service support, that can really improve productivity from 14 to 35%. Even though I love the name of the research, the first one there, and that is, will generative AI make more productive at work? Yes, but only if you're not already good at your job. So I think then the little Britain here, the computer says no is an example. There's still the human element. This is to support the human element, or perhaps even more to allow self-service out the human element in the past. So that's really just setting the scene. So it's not a question about if you're going to use Gen AI based on this research. It's really when are you going to do it, and what's the value and the use cases. And to address then what are the concerns, what are the things we should keep in mind, I'll hand over to Andrew to guide us through that. Over to you.
Thank you, Adler. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you can hear me okay. As I said at the start, listen, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all. For those who may have just joined a little bit late, I'm Andrew Bentley. I lead the security business here at Microsoft UK. And what I was going to do is just spend maybe the next 10 minutes talking to you a little bit more about how you maximize the value of these generative AI tools and capabilities, such as Copilot for M365, but as I said, minimize risk as well as we go forwards. But let me just start by echoing exactly what Atlas just said and the points he just made. This Gen AI new revolution, new technology innovation is basically poised to create a whole new way of working for us. We know the pace of working is increasing exponentially, data volumes, information, always on communications, the pressure that puts on people to drive more productivity, and business leaders themselves feeling that pressure to increase productivity amid sort of economic uncertainty. That is the opportunity that generative AI now presents for us all. And in March, we introduced Copilot for M365. So for a lot of customers, that platform shift to generative AI is already underway. And as Atlas just articulated and shared some stats there, the organizations that embrace AI are going to unleash creativity and unlock productivity for everyone, which is going to usher in this new wave of sort of productivity growth and value creation for us. The reason I want to share the slide with you is this: the feedback we're receiving basically underlines all those points that Atlas just made and the points that I've just been talking to. Already, 2/3 of the users using Copilot said that it's improved the quality of their work. 70% are saying that actually using these tools is making them more productive. And then you've got nearly over 3/4 now saying they wouldn't want to give up those tools now they've got access to them. So you can already start to see the value add and the productivity gains that generative AI tools like Copilot from Microsoft 365 is going to bring to organizations such as yourselves. Next slide, please. However, this is the key bit we wanted to talk about. With all the benefits of AI, it does come with risks and new challenges that all of you, I'm sure, are wrestling with and trying to work through as you think about how do you unlock the value at the same time and minimize risk. So what we're showing you here is based on a recent Microsoft survey, some of the top challenges when we're talking about sort of data risk and data governance generated through the use of generative AI applications and tools. So, you know, over half the organizations we talk to concerning about lack of visibility that they get in terms of the unsanctioned use of Gen AI tools. Actually, nearly all the organizations we surveyed worrying about the lack of controls to protect the data being shared in AI. So, you know, data security is a critical concern. So how do you, from a security point of view, ensure any sensitive data that's being exchanged between the user and the app is being protected? And so it's a real area of concern. And then you've got this sort of regulatory pressure as well. So with the rapid adoption of AI and the rapid adoption and innovation of the technology, you've also got the rapid adoption and regulations trying to play catch up. So you've got security teams worrying about how they remain compliant as well from a data protection point of view. Next slide, please, Vivek. And I think this leads me then on to the discussions that personally I'm having a lot with customers and a lot of my teams, and I know people at Microsoft and companies like Protection are having across the board, which is now you've got access to tools on the general availability of Microsoft Copilot from Microsoft 365, and you've got the appetite of customers such as yourself wanting to leverage all of those phenomenal AI capabilities and value gains for their business. And you've got the desire in the boardroom to sort of innovate and gain competitive advantage. You've then got the counterbalance, which is the security teams and data teams concerns now around the access that people can have to data inside their business. And what some of these tools could genuinely expose in terms of access to information. So you've got this real risk balance tension, which is actually holding customers back in lots of cases, and that inertia is obviously not useful for anybody. Vivek will illustrate this later. There is absolute value, however, in not waiting, deploying Copilot for Microsoft 365 quickly, getting people using and adopting, ensuring access to certain users in certain use cases, and obviously then working on the data access that those individuals got. It's a great way to generate efficiencies and value realization quickly, whilst at the same time working on that sort of broader data security strategy for that broader rollout and mass adoption across your organization. This isn't really an either-or conversation. What we're saying is you can do both, and you should be doing both. Leveraging the technology quickly to understand how you can bring value to your business and gain that competitive advantage, and at the same time be working on the data security strategy and enhancements at the same time. Now, when we've talked and Gartner and other resources have shared, obviously what we're seeing here on the right hand side is the number one concern for organizations when it comes to using generative AI tools like Copilot is obviously data privacy and data security. And so when we talk about that, if I can ask you the next slide, please, Vivek. When customers that talk to us about what they're worried about from a data security and privacy point of view, it firstly really falls into these main three buckets. And I'm sure this resonates with you all. So again, love people's feedback in the chat. Is there other concerns, other issues they're seeing? Does this resonate with you? Feel free to put your comments there, and either myself or the team will address them as we go through. But yeah, let me start with the first one, data oversharing. Clearly an obvious one for a lot of you. With using Copilot and other generative AI tools, organizations and users might attempt to start access sensitive information, such as confidential projects or personal data, through some of these new AI applications. And without the appropriate data security controls, these AI apps could access or even summarize or even create content based on that sensitive data, which then increases the risk of sort of data overexposure or oversharing. From a data leak perspective, you've got users may inadvertently disclose sensitive data, such as customers' personal data, to AI applications. The example Atla shared earlier around ChatGPT, this is probably the one that's hitting the news, and when you talk to other organizations, the one we hear the most about, which is end users using effectively a public-facing service and a consumer-based service to upload personal data to, and that's sort of what's hitting the headlines a lot. Now, this point specifically is less relevant for Copilot for M365, because that comes with built-in controls. And I think that's a really key message that you'll hear me reiterate as we go through on this. And then there's this last point, which is sort of non-compliance usage, because with the sort of ease of content creation that you get through generative AI, users can obviously effortlessly generate new content, including unethical or high-risk content like fake news, fraudulent content, or sort of stock manipulation. So it's a real imperative for you and others to start to look at how do you govern the usage of AI applications within your organization, ensuring compliance with codes of conduct and regulations as well. So broadly, these are the three things we're starting to see. Next slide, please, Vivek. And there's a great question in the chat, which I'll come on to in a second. So this point is key, and again, one of the key points I wanted to take away from my pitch here, which is effective data security is a prerequisite to deploying AI responsibly, and I think that's absolutely critical to how we adopt and move going forwards. And I think as part of this survey that Gartner did sort of back in October at their event, less than half of the CIOs and technology leaders that they interviewed at that point were confident their organization was set up from a data security point of view to mitigate the risks of AI. And that's concerning itself, which is why we want to do sessions like this with you all today, to give you hope and obviously a strategy as well in terms of what you can do to mitigate those risks going forwards. Next slide, please, Vivek. So with all these concerns I've just shared with you, we at Microsoft actually commissioned a survey a few months back, and what we got out of that survey was nearly half the security leaders we surveyed expected to actually try and continue to restrict all use of generative AI in the workplace. And that isn't the really best way to try and address the perceived security risks. Because as we all know, and as history tells us, when users are prevented from using their preferred technology, the reverse happens. We actually see an increase in risky behavior, not a decrease. This is exactly the same trend with software as a service, with shadow IT, with shadow applications, with shadow cloud effectively. That we'll start to see the increase of shadow AI increasing popularity in our businesses as well. And what we see is like almost 90% of business users, when given a choice, will sidestep cybersecurity controls to achieve the business goal. And when users are restricted from utilizing AI applications, they'll look for alternative ways to access and use these apps, like ChatGPT and others. And when they do that, what that does is that increases this dark usage of AI, and that creates usage which IT, security teams, data teams aren't able to monitor, aren't able to control, and that creates even more risk to your organization. So you're effectively left with two options. Either try and block the generative AI usage in your organization, noting exactly what I've just told you here, that that's going to lead to shadow AI and unregulated and insecure usage in your organization. Or, hopefully this is where all of you are thinking this at this point, is provide your end users with access to generative AI capabilities from applications and vendors that you trust, that have security and compliance built into them, and that you and your teams can monitor usage and effectiveness of these tools going forwards. Can I go to the next slide, please? So to that point, instead of trying to restrict AI or turning a blind eye to it, security teams can more effectively mitigate these risks by gaining insights into what's happening in the organization. And this is going to reduce what we call generative AI anxiety. Visibility into how AI is being used allows you and your organization to directly confront and manage the risks that may arise. And without this proactive approach, customers become uncertain of where the next risk is going to come from. So when you think about trying to understand your risk in adopting generative AI applications, there's a few basic questions to start with. Obviously, which AI applications are being utilized by users? Who's using these applications? So which users are they? And how is access being governed? What type of data is flowing both in and out of these AI applications as well? So how are you tracking and monitoring all of this stuff? And then also critically, who's providing these AI applications? What are the AI principles and security that's built within these applications by that vendor or that supplier that's built out the AI application itself? Actually, do you understand the principles and the developer security controls that have been built into these applications from the offset? If I could ask you to the next slide, Vivek. And this is why I wanted to share this view with you, because these are Microsoft's AI principles. And this is a key point which relates to one of the questions I saw in the chat earlier about how can we make sure usage of Copilot won't be used for machine gen AI learning. We as a company have been very transparent about our AI principles that we hold ourselves true, and this goes into development of every single one of our products, so that any AI tool from Microsoft you can trust has this fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, transparency and accountability at its absolute core. And when it comes to Microsoft 365 Copilot, there's three key things I want you to remember on this point. One is your data is absolutely your data. It is not shared with anybody else. And to address the question that you asked earlier, your data is not used to train any of the OpenAI Foundation models without your permission. So again, you retain control over those. And then lastly, because of if you're using tools like Copilot for Microsoft 365, this has privacy and security embedded and core to its development, its application. So it's protected by the most comprehensive enterprise compliance and security controls out there. So you have the comfort that your data, when it's in and being used by this application, it is protected in that way. Vivek, if I could ask you to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to finish on this slide and I'll hand over to Vivek in a second. The key thing I'm trying to get across is ensuring that you secure generative AI applications from reputable vendors who've invested in responsible AI foundations and have got security and compliance capabilities baked into their offering from the start. It's going to give you the confidence in the security of the tools you're using and the security of your data fundamentally. And it's absolutely key. But remember, that's only one part of the story. You need to also remember that a lot of these tools themselves are going to take on the protections you've got in place for your users that are using and have access to these tools. And that is what Vivek is going to talk to you about now. So how do you put the governance and the processes in place around the use of Copilot for Microsoft 365 in your organization, and also ensuring that you have the robust and effective data security strategy you need to maximize value from these tools and minimize risk. I wanted to just leave this slide with you because I thought it's a good way to sort of set a quick foundation view around security and compliance to help you think about setting up Copilot for M365 for success and minimize risk. And just remember that point I made, that Copilot for M365 takes on the current protections and policies of the users taking it. So yeah, just wanted to leave you with that point, and just remember the other two things I said. An effective data strategy is critical to deploying AI responsibly. And then secondly, using AI responsible applications within security and compliance controls is going to help you give you the confidence and comfort that your data is protected, but enable you to monitor the usage of those applications going forward. With that, Vivek, let me hand to you.
So can I just jump in with a quick comment?
Okay.
Sorry, two things. There's some comments along the way here, Andrew. So when Vivek take over, it would be nice if you just look at the chat here and see if there's anything you want to respond to. The other one is just, I was smiling when I talked about what AI tools out there exist also on the web. I think we learned in social media, if you're not paying for it, then you are the products being sold sometimes. It's this joke about two pigs in the barn saying, oh, even the food is free here. So it's really about, okay, if you go and leverage these free tools out there, there's a consequence sometimes. And therefore, it's better to say, okay, let's get this under control and to do this in a way without losing or creating risk for the business. I think that was your point earlier on.
Spot on. Spot on.
So stay with us here. We'll open up for questions at the end. But before that, let's hand over to Vivek.
Well, thank you. I was very like a student making a lot of points when Andrew was talking about a lot of good things. There's kind of 3 points I've kind of picked up from what Atle said, what Andrew said. Is the first one was, dark usage of AI in absence of an organization's ability to provide secure AI solutions. The second thing is, how do you do that is by gaining insights into organizations' activities and getting a good understanding of what your risks are related to the data. And if I just stay on this slide for just a very quick second, manage SharePoint permissions, classification labeling, DLP policy. Most of you would agree that these are not the activities organizations are starting just because of Copilot. I think we've been saying this all along. In every single webinar we have done together with all of you and in other sessions, is that, that foundational governance is so important for an organization to be effective when it comes to better management of your information, making informed decisions, etc. And I think if there is anything, Copilot for M365 or generative AI introduction is putting a spotlight on the need for actually doing that, and maybe with some urgency to be able to act on some of these controls, which we all have been talking about for quite a while. So on that note, let me move on to my section. I'm going to talk about 2 things: Copilot options evaluation, and leave you towards the end with a checklist, which we have prepared based on the pilots or the implementations that our customers have undertaken as regards to implementing Copilot for Microsoft 365. So just very, very quickly remind everybody how Copilot for Microsoft 365 gets its information. So it kind of works on a prompt basis. A user initiates a prompt, which triggers Copilot to leverage Microsoft Graph and Semantic Index and the associated large language models, which have been trained on public data set, and provide you with a response. And that response could be a question and answer model. It could be creating a summarization of a conversation, discussion, meeting, document, etc., or in fact, writing net new content using the help of Copilot. Overall, these are the options which are available to you from a Copilot perspective. There is a Microsoft Copilot, which is personal use. There is a Bing chat for enterprise, and now there is a Copilot for Microsoft 365. And as Andrew said, Copilot for Microsoft 365 comes with a number of security, compliance, governance controls built in, and especially in the Microsoft 365 platform provides you the ability to apply those foundational governance controls, and Copilot for Microsoft 365 respects those. Now, whether those controls are in context of data access governance, SharePoint permissions, OneDrive permissions, sharing permissions, etc., or enforcing access controls or encryption using sensitivity labels, or controlling the sharing behaviors in line with your organizational policy through data loss prevention policies. There's a number of those controls, and I see in the chat some people have also mentioned solutions like Defender for Cloud Apps is a great way for tracking, monitoring, and controlling the use of other GenAI apps, which maybe are not authorized within your organization, but people are looking to access that. A few facts. Andrew's covered most of those, but just very, very quickly, if you are using Copilot already, you know that the chats that you have with Microsoft Copilot, they are persistent, which means you ask Copilot a question within Microsoft Teams, it builds a chat history, similar to how you would see the chats building up when you chat with your colleagues. So there are some, I'll come to that later on. From a checklist point of view, there is an opportunity here that introducing Copilot in your organization, what controls, what options you have available in order to be able to monitor and maybe control the life cycle or protection of those chats. And you said it previously, your data is your data. So there are no additional elevated access required for Copilot to access your data. So it kind of works in context of the delegated access. So if as a user, I have access to data, then Copilot will access that data in order to collect a response. And often we see that's where the challenges for many organizations is, especially in Microsoft 365, the way foundational controls, sharing controls, site permissions are managed. Often these are too open. A very common scenario is people when share links, even within the organization, very often the primary link sharing method people use is anyone in the organization. So those are some of the scenarios which kind of lead for implicit access being given because the user already has access to that data. So very important point to kind of include that as part of building the checklist and the readiness checklist to quickly address some of these concerns related to access to data. Chat data is not used to train the models. So my chats with Copilot in Teams, I may be asking a lot of questions, but they are not, and the responses from those are not used to train the large language models within the Copilot for Microsoft 365. And in general, this is again ties into your data is your data, is that the large language model training is trained on a public web data, and that is trained on a public data set, which is available for a certain period of time, and it's not constantly updated from the public data set. And for that reason, Microsoft has a Bing integration where any information, and that can be, again, based on your risk appetite, based on your privacy controls, each one of those controls can be switched on and off, where you can actually, if you wanted to, control your Copilot implementation to not go outside of your Microsoft 365 boundary and provide all the responses based on the large language models which are available at the time of activating. Some of our customers have some concerns about Bing Chat for Enterprise on how the data privacy, how does the data flow outside, etc. So I think that's a key consideration for organizations to kind of reflect on as they activate Copilot. And this is our observation that 9 out of 10 implementations, the initial set of use cases which got implemented did not have any requirement to actually access the public data set outside of Microsoft 365 tenant. Majority of the use cases were related to better access to organizational information through Copilot. And as I said, Copilot can access data and create responses based on the user access to the data. And a user can have access to the data, either they have explicit access to the data or they own the data. For example, it is in my OneDrive for Business. or I'm actively working in Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, etc. Or somebody has shared information, but that information has been shared with anyone in the organization or anyone in general, anonymous sharing, etc. So those are some of the scenarios which we consider as organizations should bring together as part of the pilot considerations for Copilot in order to address those and compare them with your use case scenarios for which you are actually looking to activate Copilot. So summarizing for everyone, there are kind of three key risks which we'd recommend organizations to evaluate. They are not very different from what Andrew had said previously. Source of information. What information Copilot has access to, and I will come to that in a few slides later on. What can you do to control that? And from our experience, you don't necessarily need to go through a full 1-year program to get your data access governance and control in order to address this. There are a few controls which can be activated in order to not fully address that concern of oversharing the data, but definitely apply some mitigating factors to it. There is also, I think I saw that in a chat that somebody typed about, something appeared in the transcription, etc. So there's definitely an element of, you may have heard of that as hallucination or confidently inaccurate. So that's definitely, and we've kind of run some tests with customers, and that confident inaccuracy somehow is also stemming from, in our experience in the test we have done, is through the access controls, which are probably not appropriately set. And as an example, we did test, and I just wanted to kind of share that very, very quickly. We asked Copilot a question, what is the HR policy? And the HR policy, there might be a draft version sitting somebody's OneDrive for Business with too much open access, and there is no reason why Copilot would not go there and access that data if it has access to that data. So that's something can create, and I think from what I'm seeing in the organizations, net new content created, and if it is inaccurate, and if organizations do not have controls to verify, validate that content or appropriate education to users, then that could lead to additional risks. And then the third and final one is, of course, content sprawl. Now with Copilot, you only need one sentence for it to write a 4-page document for you. And it will write a beautiful document for you. But if you are not already thinking about lifecycle management, retention management, then the time is now to actually start thinking about, perhaps in context of the net new content which is being created or generated by Copilot. And there are several such opportunities for you to establish that control for the net new conversation channels which are getting opened up with use of Copilot for Microsoft 365. And from the beginning itself, introduce the element of lifecycle management so that you have a better control from the beginning on the content sprawl. Just very quickly, I just wanted to highlight some of the use cases which we have consolidated very, very high level and kind of our customers' view on the risk rated, especially from the point of either confident inaccuracy or the content generated, which is based on perhaps inaccurate data, perhaps stale data, perhaps the data which has been overshared. So drafting a new document based on key points is something that we have seen that often organizations need to do a little bit more than just activating Copilot in order to make sure that the source of the content is controlled. And now there are many such controls possible within Microsoft 365 through which you can handle and apply a level of control to what data Copilot gets access to. I think that's quite important in context of activating Copilot. And hopefully the risk-based approach like this, for example, email summarization, the way Copilot accesses an email and summarizes that email, we've seen and we have tested that that is a low risk for an organization because it is acting in context of the access the user has within their inbox to the email which they have access to. It is not sourcing the data from outside of a user mailbox in order to be able to summarize that data. So any scenarios, any use cases which are created in context of summarizing an email, summarizing a meeting, which is based on a transcript or a recording of a meeting, is all controlled in context of the data, the primary source of data which Copilot is accessing in order to generate a response for you. So highly recommend that as you are thinking of piloting Copilot or activating Copilot across your organization, that not only just consider the use cases, but also have an element of risk management associated with it. And from this slide, I can say that the email summarization, Teams meeting script summarization, discovering corporate knowledge, these are some of the primary use cases which most customers have actually opted for in order to see the value of Copilot. And then in parallel to that, work on your SharePoint governance, data access governance, labeling, etc., in order to be able to have a better control on the other data or other kind of interactions or use cases where Copilot needs to go beyond the immediate data set which is available to it. So just quickly summarizing options to consider from an evaluation point of view, please assess your risk exposure. That's the first starting point. And there are many such capabilities available within Microsoft Purview for you to be able to discover your data. In the next slide, I have a couple of options which InfoTection offers in terms of solutions, reports, etc., which can be plugged into your Microsoft 365 platform in order to bring that data and present that in a more management interface, sort of management reporting dashboard style. But the key things to focus on: data oversharing, discovery of sensitive data, and access governance. What kind of access permissions do you have generally established on SharePoint sites, OneDrive for Business, etc.? And that will enable you to identify any workspaces, any data which potentially sensitive, potentially risky, and has a risk of exposure. And then behind the scenes, there are new capabilities. As I said, there's a control now available within Microsoft 365, Copilot for M365, to be able to exclude certain sites, which you may want to. Pilot with low risk scenarios, and that will absolutely unlock right now, today itself, for you to use the value and see the value of Copilot without having to embark on weeks and weeks of remediation effort. So definitely recommend opting for low risk scenarios. I shared a few, like summarizing your email, summarizing your chats, meeting requests, etc. But even for those scenarios, make sure that you have some controls available in Microsoft 365 in order to protect that net new content which will be generated by Copilot, but also manage the lifecycle of it. And then from a long-term perspective point of view, establish the controls, establish the long-term controls, the education process for users on what Copilot offers, what's the appropriate use and policy to use Copilot in the work, and also the controls and the guidance to users to verify and validate the content which is being generated by Copilot. Okay, just very quickly, InfoTection does offer an information oversharing dashboard, where as part of your Copilot assessment, or if you have bought licenses, then InfoTection is a fast track ready partner. You can request a fast track assistance to deploy your Copilot licenses. And as part of that, we do deliver some of these reports to help you get an understanding of the risk exposure on what kind of data exists within your Microsoft 365 platform, what are the access controls around that, and how is it shared? And that kind of builds into the overall risk score in context of the data access to Copilot for Microsoft 365. I'm going to switch to the next section and spend the next maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes to leave you with a quick checklist, which you should consider if you are looking to activate Copilot by yourself or with the help of any of your partners. So the first thing is manage anyone or open access. We highly recommend that you review your SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams admin settings to see what controls you have applied in terms of anyone access or anyone in the organization access sharing. And some of those controls you can centrally manage if you wanted to, or maybe selectively for users with whom you are looking to do the pilot with Copilot. So it's not just about all or nothing. There are controls available whereby you can ring fence those controls first to your pilot users to see the outcome and the impact. Definitely recommend classification of your data, leveraging sensitivity labels or retention controls to be able to apply some of those controls to your data. Not everything can be managed by access permissions, and hence data loss prevention, sensitivity labels are great tools. And if you are an E3 or even add-on, products from Microsoft, leveraging Microsoft Purview sensitivity labels would be a great way to introduce the sensitivity labels to your pilot users, bring in the concept of classifying the files either manually, making it mandatory for your users, or if you have the advanced licenses from Microsoft like E5 or one of the add-ons, then you get a whole lot of auto classification tools, including using the Microsoft pre-built classifiers, which are available as part of the Microsoft Purview platform. Automate data lifecycle management. Now that is for organizations is a big topic. But what I would recommend in this case is that as part of introducing Copilot, you have the ability to automate the lifecycle management or deletion or automated retention management for at least some of the net new content generated by Copilot. For that, easy targets would be target Copilot chats. So if you are activating Copilot, then you can target Copilot chats and only apply retention to Copilot chats. You can also apply retention to transcripts. You can imagine, I talked about content sprawl. Every single meeting that you want to summarize, you need to activate the transcription. So naturally, for the users who are going to use Copilot, there's going to be an increase in the number of transcripts as a minimum or recordings generated in order to use the Copilot summarization capability. Why not introduce lifecycle management policy, a retention policy to delete those transcripts automatically after a certain period of time? And because it is a net new interaction being generated, you're likely going to get less resistance from your users. Of course, understood that implementing retention management, record management to files and emails is a longer activity. But what we have seen is that it's been easier to introduce retention management for those two scenarios which I just mentioned. The next is you need to start thinking about some actionable insights that you want to create on monitoring the interaction individual users have with Copilot. And of course, you can go advanced with Power BI, Sentinel, audit log access, etc. But again, as a starting point, you can absolutely leverage some of the capabilities available in Microsoft Purview, like communication compliance, to be able to monitor interactions and generate alerts, etc. As the interaction with Copilot develops between users and Copilot. So that's something definitely worth considering and start thinking about what KPIs you want to measure as you activate some of the Gen AI solutions. And I think this is the final item in my checklist, is very, very important to educate your users. Education is key, training end users and your subject matter experts. There are important topics to be discussed, especially around alleviating any concerns of how AI works. What is it doing? For every single one of our engagements with Copilot, we have had to go through a data privacy impact assessment of Copilot. That is something so important and can be included as part of the pilot set of activities to be able to respond to your data privacy. SMEs raise awareness, educate them on exactly how Copilot is accessing the data, where is it storing, where the data is getting processed, etc. And you get tremendous help and support from Microsoft as well in responding to those questions. And of course, the end users. There's going to be new way of interacting with Gen AI. It's something which we haven't done before in that interactive model. The way we have been searching for information is just type in a keyword and then get a response from Google or Microsoft or within SharePoint search engine, etc. Gen AI brings a completely new way of interacting. So I think it's definitely something should be on your agenda as part of your training program. You don't need to buy Copilot licenses. You don't need to activate Copilot for everybody in order to just start raising awareness about how generative AI works, how should you use it. And it's always a good idea to also remind users the benefits of using Copilot for Microsoft 365 as it keeps your data within the organization compared to going off to third-party and other Gen AI solutions, which are maybe not necessarily endorsed by you as an organization. So that was my checklist. I just wanted to just splash this over here that there is a well-defined path to activate Copilot in a secure manner with appropriate governance. And there are, it's not a sprint. It takes a little while, but we have a recipe to very quickly show the value of Copilot to a smaller set of users, to a subset of an organization, and build the confidence through that so that you have better control and better understanding on when you activate, when you unleash Copilot on the rest of the organization, what would be the net new impact and how will you handle the new and emerging risks out of it. So final summary, Microsoft 365 Copilot or Copilot for Microsoft 365 is built on your foundational governance. This, as Andrew said, as I said previously as well, your data is your data, and it's your data quality and your data governance controls which feed into Microsoft 365 Copilot. And as I said, this is not a new thing we've been discussing. We've been talking about information governance, information protection for some time now. So all of you who have been investing in better security controls, better governance controls, better access controls, the benefit is that Copilot is actually going to leverage all of that. Final thought, the overall, the investment and the call to action is to kind of at least have your tenant assessment done. You have some tools available within your tenant. You can request in protection to come and do that for you. We do offer a Copilot readiness assessment. Through that, we identify the additional controls you need in order to activate Copilot securely. We also, as part of that, collect use cases and identify the use cases which you can activate safely based on your current controls. We also provide advisory support recommendation on driving change management around Gen AI in general, and then unlock the capability for an organization to be able to start activating Copilot. And the trend we are seeing is that organizations are activating Copilot in a sort of more either a use case by use case pattern, or an organization like a business or a function model to be able to understand and assess the need of a business within a business or an organization, and be able to activate Copilot and position Copilot so that they can actually use it, and not just use it as a new shiny tool. And then after that, the adoption doesn't scale to what you were expecting on the productivity gains Copilot or a tool like Copilot will bring to your organization. On that note, I have 9 minutes left. I'm going to hand back to Atle to say a few words.
Thank you. Really interesting. So there's been a couple of questions along the way. See if we can get Andrew back also for just the summary and final thoughts. But the question just came in on the side here in the chat, Vivek, and that is the Copilot application of retention and sensitivity labels different from what that's in syntax? Are you able to answer that, or we need more context?
Well, syntax provides a different mechanism to apply retention and sensitivity labels. There are many such options available to get the sensitivity and retention controls to your data. Syntax is one of the methods to get to that, but in no way is conflicting. By the way, Copilot does not apply retention or sensitivity labels to your file. You need to apply retention and sensitivity labels. Syntax is one of the methods to do it, and once it is applied, Copilot will respect it.
And Andrew, just to build upon that, would you say, since actually, as the big boss of Microsoft Security, what's the key tools perhaps people need to consider here to mitigate, to manage risk, but also to maximize value of Copilot within the risk or within the security compliance suite?
Yeah, good question. And I think that point you've just made, Vivek, and I've just seen in the chat a couple of questions, if I may, and I'll answer the question out specifically, is you hear a lot of comments about Copilot doing something, or Copilot is responsible for either the application of retention and sensitivity levels. What actually I think we've got to get our head around is you need to have all of those data protection, data governance, and tools, and that Vivek talked through, and the data classification labels, that all those things need to be applied, that then goes into Copilot, and Copilot will reason over it in the same way the users are. So to your question, Atle, we obviously talk about Microsoft Purview, insider risk management, data for classification, DLP, all of these different things are absolutely critical to set the right data security foundations for you and your users. I think you have to start with that mindset first, not do it for Copilot, if that makes sense. It's exactly what Vivek said right at the start, which is this is not new because Copilot is now out there. This is something that companies and organizations have had to do for a long time. The difference now is you've got generative AI that takes on the rights and the policies of the user, and can obviously then scale that the users themselves individually couldn't. So the tools and the applications that you need, as I said, Purview, all of the identity governance capabilities as well within Entra, but DLP, IRM, all of those capabilities that Vivek's just walked us through, all of those are the sort of core foundations that are needed in place to have that foundational data security ready to then have AI to be able to be deployed responsibly.
Valid point. I also know that perhaps also just a comment to that. I think it was mentioned syntax in one of the questions. And SharePoint Premium, you have the lifecycle management of workspaces that help to keep control of things. The access review that helps. So there's a lot of features and solutions that will benefit. It's really just what's the right mix or what's the right setup.
Exactly.
So last question for you, Andrew. What is your recommendation that people should do tomorrow or next week or next month here to move forward? Because as my point in the beginning was, you don't stop this trend. You shouldn't try to stop this trend. This is the new reality of how we manage data and secure data and get value out of the data. So what do we do now? Because I know there are concerns like you also addressed.
Yeah, I think you can't, as a company, afford to wait. You can't afford to spend probably, 9 to 12 months driving a data security strategy to then get ready for Copilot. I think I made the statement early on. This isn't an either-or scenario, i.e. you must wait for Copilot or your data security foundations to be in place to then use Copilot. You have to start to take advantage of it now. If I'm honest, Atla, if you could go back to your Sainsbury's Copilot adoption journey slide, that sums it up better than I ever could. What would I start with now? Then I would absolutely start with looking at the AI usage within your organization today. What are your overexposure? What is the risk that you have today? Look at the data security and oversharing risk report that you did for Sainsbury's. I'd be looking at that. And then I would be looking at, right, what are the capabilities and tool set that you've already got in-house that you can make sure you're turning on and enabling for the maximum effect quickly. So I think that slide, I don't know whether you've gone to it or not, that would be probably where I would start with people. It's a great guide.
Okay. Vivek, anything you want to add as last comments and recommendation for people attending here? What should I do next?
Well, I think the first thing is to just know your data. There's so much to be learned from what is already available in your tenant. You don't need great many tools to understand that, and just sort of start thinking about the foundational governance. I've seen many customers who are just starting with just a small set of licenses to just explore what risks exist within the organization. So kind of take it from two ways. Do the discovery of your data, but at the same time buy some licenses so that you can actually evaluate some of those risks, which at least you have it on the paper, but then you have the ability to validate, are those risks actually real in context of your data?
So the conclusion there, standing still is not an option. It's moving forward, but perhaps in parallel run. Educating yourself, getting more use cases, value, experimentation with Copilot and other similar tools, while at the same time getting better understanding of the data, securing that, managing that, which you should have done years ago, by the way. But now there's another reason for doing it.
Exactly.
Well, I just want to say one more thing. Don't just buy one license, please, because that just doesn't prove anything. So what we recommend is, well, buy at least 20 licenses or 10 licenses so that you have the opportunity to invite people from different parts of the organization, a representative set. That would be a good, the smallest set which I would recommend to an organization to kind of just start evaluating. But if you're buying just one license, it's probably not going to give you a great deal of value.
But if I may, Vivek, on that point, actually, if you use some of the services, let's say like AI Hub in Microsoft Purview, you could very quickly understand the AI usage that already exists in your business. And then I would encourage you to think about, right, how do I get Copilot licenses that cover those users who are already actively using AI applications, but are probably using services like ChatGPT and other things? That would be a smart way of mitigating risk in your business by getting them away from external third-party applications, the way you haven't got the ability to monitor the usage and the data security around it, and give them a secure tool that allows them to do what they want to do in a much more compliant and secure way.
Thank you. I think we should keep that as the lasting words there, because I realized I thought we had plenty of time. We've already been an hour. That's how it goes, but it's fun and it's clever people you listen to. So thank you very much, Andrew, for being a guest here. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Vivek, my colleague. Again, fantastic. And thank you all for attending here. The recording will be available soon. And I also sent me contact details. You will also get an email that if you want to have a one-to-one chat, let us know. Thank you all, and have a lovely evening or the rest of the day.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks all.